August 6, 1944. 31,000 feet above Hamburg, Germany. 30 Messerschmitt Bf-109s opened fire simultaneously on a formation of American bombers. 1,000 rounds per second tore through aluminum skin. 10 men per aircraft. 96 bombers. The math was catastrophic. And the only man close enough to stop the slaughter was drunk. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. Join us as we explore more incredible stories, historical events, and inspiring moments from the past. The community is growing, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. His name was George Preddy, 5 feet 9, 125 pounds, a cotton mill worker from Greensboro, North Carolina. The United States Navy had rejected him 3 times. Too short. Spinal curvature, high blood pressure. They told him his body was physically unqualified for flight training and sent him home. 3 separate times. On August 6, 1944, that rejected cotton mill worker climbed into a cockpit with a pounding hangover, led 4 Mustangs against 30 German fighters, and personally destroyed 6 of them in under 7 minutes. This is how it happened. By early August 1944, the 8th Air Force was bleeding out over Europe. 206 P-51 Mustang pilots had been killed or captured in just 4 months. 17 died in July alone. The average American fighter pilot survived 93 combat hours before being shot down. The mathematics were merciless. Every morning, men ate breakfast knowing the odds were calculating against them. Every evening, empty chairs appeared at dinner tables that had been full that morning. The Luftwaffe had adapted. German pilots were no longer just defending their airspace. They were hunting American squadron leaders specifically. 3 majors had been killed in 6 weeks. The Germans understood that destroying leadership destroyed effectiveness. Kill the man leading the formation, and 30 fighters become 30 individuals instead of 1 weapon. Hamburg was one of the most critical targets in Germany. Oil refineries, U-boat construction facilities, industrial infrastructure that kept the German war machine running. The Luftwaffe defended it with everything available. German fighter pilots knew what losing Hamburg meant. They would die before they let American bombers through unopposed. On the night of August 5th, the morning mission had been scrubbed. Bad weather forecast over the target. War bond money was burning holes in pockets. Someone organized a party. The drinking started at 9 in the evening. Bourbon, beer, more bourbon. Fighter pilots celebrating another day above ground. George Preddy joined in. At 1 in the morning, the mission was back on. Weather forecast had changed. The bombers needed escort. Someone shook Preddy awake. He stumbled to the briefing room still drunk. His group commander looked at him once and made a decision. Preddy was not leading today. He was not fit to fly. Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer stepped forward. Meyer was already an ace himself. He vouched for Preddy personally. He promised Preddy would be ready by takeoff. The group commander looked at both of them for a long moment. He relented, but he told Meyer this was entirely on him if something went wrong. At 9:30, Preddy climbed into the cockpit of his P-51D Mustang Cripes a Mighty III. His head was splitting. His hands were shaking. His vision was slightly blurred. The instrument panel seemed to vibrate more than usual. He blinked hard and focused on the airspeed indicator. 70 miles per hour for takeoff. He had done this 142 times before. 36 Mustangs lifted off from Bodney Airfield and climbed toward 28,000 feet over the English Channel. The flight to Hamburg would take 90 minutes. Preddy used every minute of it. Deep breaths, eyes scanning the horizon, hands checking the gun switches. 850 caliber machine guns, 1,800 rounds of ammunition. He needed every bullet to count today. The bomber stream appeared at 10:43. 96 B-17 Flying Fortresses in staggered boxes. Each one carried 10 men and 6,000 pounds of bombs. They were heading for Hamburg's industrial district. The Luftwaffe would be waiting. At 11:07, Preddy spotted contrails, high and southwest. Organized, which meant they were not friendly. Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters. More than 30 of them positioning for a diving attack on the 3rd bomber box. The tactical situation was completely against him. The Germans had altitude advantage, numerical superiority, the sun at their backs. Standard Luftwaffe doctrine: climb above the bombers, wait for American fighters to burn fuel chasing you, then dive through the escorts at 450 miles per hour and vanish before anyone can respond. But the German pilots had made one critical mistake. They had not checked the 6 o'clock position behind them. They were watching the bombers below. They were scanning the flanks. They were not looking back. Preddy had 30 seconds before they would spot his formation and scatter. His hangover had disappeared. The nausea was gone. Combat did that to a man. The body understood the difference between a training flight and a fight for survival. Adrenaline overrode everything. Training overrode fear. His hands were steady on the control stick. His breathing was calm. He had two choices: call his entire formation into a group attack, 36 Mustangs against 30 Bf-109s massive and scattered, or take his immediate flight of 4 and hit the Germans right now. Fast and violent before they knew the Americans were there. 4 against 30. Terrible odds, but surprise was worth 20 fighters. He decided in 3 seconds. He pushed the throttle forward. The 4 Mustangs accelerated to 340 miles per hour. 1,000 yards. 900. 800. The Germans still had not seen them. The lead Bf-109 began rolling into his dive toward the bombers below. Preddy's gun sight settled on the fuselage. 600 yards. 500. His finger moved to the trigger. He opened fire at 400 yards. 8 50-caliber machine guns converged on the lead Bf-109. Tracer rounds walked up the fuselage. The canopy shattered. Pieces of aluminum tore from the wings. Black smoke erupted from the engine. The Messerschmitt rolled inverted and fell away trailing fire. First kill. 4 seconds from trigger to destruction. The German formation exploded into chaos. 30 pilots simultaneously understood they were being attacked from behind. Radio discipline collapsed instantly. Fighters broke in every direction. Training said, stay in formation. Survival instinct said scatter. Survival instinct won. The neat attack formation became a swarm of individuals trying not to die. Preddy had already acquired his second target, a Bf-109 breaking hard right. The German pulled 4 Gs trying to turn inside the Mustang. Preddy pulled 5. Blood drained from his head. Vision narrowed at the edges. He ignored it. The gun sight tracked across the wing route. 2-second burst. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds punched through the fuel tank. The Bf-109 detonated in midair. Second kill. 11 seconds total. Third kill came 31 seconds in. A diving pair that thought they had escaped. Preddy chased them through a vertical dive past 400 miles per hour, the airframe shuddering wind screaming through the cockpit until he closed to 300 yards on the trailing fighter and caught it broadside as it broke left. The left wing disintegrated. The aircraft snapped into an uncontrollable spin. Fourth kill at 49 seconds. The lead German from the diving pair running hard toward the deck. Preddy followed him down through 12,000 feet and fired a long burst. The tail section separated from the fuselage. The fighter tumbled end over end toward the German countryside. Fifth and sixth kills came at low altitude alone over hostile territory, with a single determined German veteran who refused to run. The two fighters spiraled around each other at 5,000 feet. In a turning fight, the Bf-109 should have won. Preddy stopped trying to outturn him. He pulled up into a climbing roll, reversed at the top, and dove back through. They passed canopy to canopy at a combined speed of 600 miles per hour. Then the German broke left when he should have broken right, and Preddy was already pulling lead. 3-second burst. The last of his ammunition. Every remaining bullet hit simultaneously. The Bf-109's left wing sheared off at the root. The fighter disintegrated. 6 kills. Total time from first trigger pull to last explosion, 6 minutes and 43 seconds. Preddy flew home with 0 rounds remaining, a returning hangover, and a Mustang that had taken 3 hits. He touched down at Bodney at 2:32 in the afternoon. His hands were shaking again. His ears were ringing. His entire body ached. Ground crew counted the bullet holes. Intelligence officers confirmed 5 kills on gun camera footage and accepted the 6th from wingman testimony. At 5 in the evening, all 6 were officially confirmed. John Meyer submitted the Medal of Honor nomination that same night. But what happened next, what the War Department decided, and what Preddy did with the squadron that everyone had given up on, that is where this story truly begins. In Part 2, we follow Preddy as he takes command of the most broken, demoralized fighter squadron in the 8th Air Force, and in one single mission, turns them into a unit that sets a record that has never been broken. 6 kills. 1 mission. 1 hungover major from a cotton mill town in North Carolina. By the time Preddy climbed out of his cockpit on August 6, 1944, the Medal of Honor nomination was already being written. John Meyer believed the mission was historic. He was right. What he did not know was that the War Department was about to say no, and that Preddy's most important work had not even started yet. The nomination traveled up the chain of command and came back on August 12th, declined. The mission did not meet the specific criteria for the nation's highest award. Preddy would receive the Distinguished Service Cross instead. The second highest decoration for valor. Still extraordinary, still rare, but not the Medal of Honor. Preddy received it without complaint. He did not argue. He did not appeal. He just wanted to fly. But here is the number nobody talks about. By October 1944, the worst-performing fighter squadron in the entire 8th Air Force had recorded 0 confirmed aerial victories in 31 days. 0. And someone at group headquarters had decided the man to fix that problem was the same pilot who had just shot down 6 Germans while hungover. The 328th Fighter Squadron flew the same P-51 Mustangs as every other squadron at Bodney. Same aircraft, same ammunition, same targets, same sky. But their kill record was an embarrassment. Other squadrons called them the weakest link out loud to their faces at the mess hall. Pilots who had trained for years believed they were failures. The morale had collapsed so completely that men were filing requests for transfers. When Preddy arrived at the 328th Operations Building on November 1st, the pilots gathered expecting a speech. Something about pride, something about potential, something about turning things around together. He gave them 3 minutes. He told them exactly why they were standing in that room: to shoot down the enemy. Nothing else mattered. He dismissed them and told them they would fly tomorrow. One pilot said afterward that it was the most motivating thing he had ever heard, because it treated them like men who already knew what to do and simply needed someone willing to lead them toward it. November 2nd, 1944. The 328th lifted off at 8 in the morning. 24 Mustangs in formation. Preddy flew his new P-51D at the front. He had refused to climb into it until the ground crew finished painting Cripes a Mighty 3 on the fuselage. The name went on every aircraft he flew. It was not superstition. It was identity. The target was Merseburg, Germany. The Leuna synthetic oil plant. The most heavily defended industrial facility in the Third Reich. Flak batteries surrounded it in concentric rings. Luftwaffe fighters defended it aggressively and personally. Every mission to Merseburg cost American lives. The crews who flew there called it the worst assignment in the European theater. At 10:15, Preddy spotted contrails at 33,000 feet. At least 25 Bf-109s positioned at their operational ceiling, waiting to dive on the bomber formation below. The Germans believed they were safe at maximum altitude. American fighters usually could not climb that high and maintain combat performance. The P-51 Mustang could. Preddy led the 328th into a climbing turn, 30,000 feet, 31,000, 32,000, 33,000. The German fighters were directly ahead, still watching the bombers below, still not checking behind them. He opened fire at 400 yards. The K-14 gyroscopic gun sight in his new Mustang calculated the lead angle automatically. The lead, Bf-109's engine came apart. The Messerschmitt rolled over and fell smoking from 33,000 feet. 24 Mustangs hit 25 Bf-109s simultaneously from behind and above. What followed was not a dogfight. It was a demolition. The 328th Fighter Squadron destroyed 25 German aircraft in 40 minutes. 8 pilots scored multiple victories. 3 pilots became aces in a single mission. The squadron set an 8th Air Force record for aerial victories by a single squadron in one engagement. The worst unit in the group had just produced the best single mission performance in the theater. Preddy had not screamed at them. He had not given them a strategy lecture. He had simply climbed into his aircraft, flown to the enemy, and shown them what aggressive, confident leadership looked like from the front. They followed. That was all it took. The squadron flew 17 more missions in November. 43 additional German aircraft destroyed. Preddy personally shot down 3 more fighters, pushing his total to 26.83 confirmed victories. He was now the leading active American ace in the European theater. Others had higher totals, but they were dead, captured, or home. Preddy was still flying. Still. December 16, 1944. Germany launched the largest offensive operation on the Western Front since D-Day. 3 armies, 250,000 soldiers, 1,500 tanks driving through the Ardennes forest toward the port of Antwerp. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. American forces were caught completely unprepared. German forces advanced 30 miles in 72 hours, while winter weather grounded Allied aircraft. On December 23rd, the weather broke. 8th Air Force Headquarters ordered the 352nd Fighter Group forward immediately. They would operate from Y-29, a rough airstrip carved from Belgian farmland near Asch. No hangars, no heated buildings. Tents in freezing mud close enough to German lines that aircraft in the landing pattern occasionally drew anti-aircraft fire. Preddy led his squadron to Y-29 on December 23rd. The conditions were punishing. Temperatures below freezing. Snow covering everything. Wind cutting through canvas walls at night. Pilots used to heated Nissen huts at Bodney were now sleeping in their flight jackets. Most believed they would freeze before they flew. Christmas Eve, 1944. Someone organized a craps game in the largest tent at Y-29. Money changed hands. Cigarettes changed hands. Preddy joined in. Dice were his game. He had been rolling them since before the war. When he rolled, he shouted his phrase for luck, the same 2 words painted on every Mustang he had ever flown. He won $1,200 by midnight. He planned to invest every dollar in war bonds when he returned to England. The game ended at 1 in the morning. Combat operations would resume Christmas morning. Rest was essential. At 7 on December 25th, Preddy attended the mission briefing. Combat air patrol over the front lines. German fighters were actively supporting ground operations. American pilots needed to maintain air superiority over the Ardennes, shoot down anything German, protect Allied ground forces below. 10 Mustangs, 3 hours, high probability of enemy contact, straightforward. He had done this 142 times. At 8:30, the 10 Mustangs lifted from Y-29. Preddy flew Cripes Mighty III with Lieutenant James Carty on his wing. They climbed to 15,000 feet and began their patrol pattern. The sky was clear. Visibility was perfect. The kind of morning that looked peaceful from above and hid slaughter below. At 10:45, ground control vectored the formation toward multiple bogies heading west. The intercept revealed 6 Bf-109s moving toward American bomber formations over the Rhine. Preddy led the attack. The Mustangs had altitude advantage. The Germans did not see them coming. He shot down 2 Bf-109s in rapid succession. The first exploded. The second lost control and spun toward the ground. 2 more confirmed kills. His total was now 28.83 aerial victories, the highest active score in the European theater. The threat to the bombers was eliminated. At 11:20, ground control broadcast a new vector. Unknown aircraft strafing Allied ground positions southeast of Liège, Belgium. Single fighter, extremely low altitude. Almost certainly a Focke-Wulf FW-190 on a ground attack run, making multiple passes over American infantry positions, then escaping at treetop height before interceptors could respond. Preddy turned his formation toward Liège and descended to 5,000 feet searching. At 11:32, he spotted it. One FW-190 racing east across open farmland at less than 100 feet altitude. The pilot was fast and skilled using terrain to stay below radar and below effective gun range, flying through small valleys, hugging ridgelines, making himself nearly impossible to engage cleanly. Preddy rolled into a diving turn and followed. Carty stayed on his wing. The other 8 Mustangs climbed to provide top cover. The chase was at treetop height. 350 miles per hour. Trees and buildings flashing past on both sides. The margin for error was measured in feet. One correction too many, one moment of distraction, and the aircraft would be wreckage in a Belgian field. The FW-190 crossed the front lines heading east. Preddy and Carty followed. They were now over Allied-controlled territory. The 431st Anti-Aircraft Battalion was positioned below. Quad 50 caliber machine guns, 4 barrels per mount. 3 aircraft appeared at treetop height, moving east at 350 miles per hour. 1 German fighter in front, 2 American Mustangs behind. The gun crews saw an enemy aircraft. They opened fire. The 430th Anti-Aircraft Battalion fired into 3 aircraft at treetop height. The FW-190 escaped. George Preddy did not. 50 caliber rounds punched through his Mustang's fuselage at 11:36 on Christmas morning, 1944. Oil pressure dropped. Coolant temperature spiked. The engine began trailing black smoke over Allied-controlled Belgium. The man who had survived 143 combat missions, a mid-air collision in Australia, and 6 German fighters, while hungover, was now dying from bullets fired by his own country. But before we get to what happened on the ground, we need to understand what Preddy's 11 months of combat had already done to the war above it. Because the Germans had noticed, and they were terrified. By December 1944, Luftwaffe intelligence had compiled a specific file on the 352nd Fighter Group. The Blue-Nosed Bastards, named for the distinctive blue paint on their Mustang cowlings. German fighter commanders briefed their pilots on the group by name. Avoid engagement when possible. Do not let them achieve altitude advantage. The 352nd had destroyed more German aircraft per mission than any comparable unit in the 8th Air Force during the final quarter of 1944. The numbers told the story the Germans could not ignore. In the 60 days following Preddy's takeover of the 328th Fighter Squadron, the group's combined kill rate increased by 63%. German pilots who had once attacked bomber formations with disciplined aggression were now breaking formation prematurely, diving for the deck before American fighters even opened fire. The psychological effect of aggressive American leadership had begun changing German behavior at the tactical level. The Luftwaffe responded by shifting resources. More experienced pilots were rotated to intercept duty specifically around 8th Air Force bomber routes. Anti-aircraft coverage was increased over key industrial targets. German formation tactics were adjusted to deny altitude advantage whenever possible. They were adapting. But adaptation takes time, and time was the one resource Germany no longer had in December 1944. The Battle of the Bulge had given German ground forces their last real offensive momentum. But in the air, the balance had already shifted past the point of recovery. Then Christmas Day arrived, and everything changed in the worst possible way. Preddy pulled back on the stick after the 50 caliber rounds hit. He needed altitude to bail out. The Mustang climbed sluggishly. Damaged control surfaces, hydraulic failures. He released the canopy at 200 feet. It flew off cleanly. He needed 1,000 feet minimum for the parachute to deploy safely. 300 feet. 400. The engine was seizing. 500 feet. The Mustang nosed over. He pushed free from the cockpit. The parachute began to open. The altitude was insufficient. Major George Preddy hit the ground near the village of Asch, Belgium at 11:37 on December 25, 1944. He was 25 years old. Lieutenant Carty returned to Y-29 and filed his report. Friendly fire. The 431st Anti-Aircraft Battalion had killed the leading American ace in the European theater while trying to shoot down a German fighter that escaped unharmed. The official reaction was swift and deeply uncomfortable. An investigation was opened. The gun crews had followed their training. They had seen a low-altitude aircraft moving east at high speed in an active combat zone and engaged it. They had not identified the trailing aircraft as friendly before firing. Under the conditions at the speed of events, identification was nearly impossible. No charges were filed. The investigation concluded the incident was a tragic operational accident. The word friendly fire appeared nowhere in Preddy's official casualty report. The document listed his death as killed in action, which was technically accurate. He had died during action. The origin of the bullets was left unspecified in most official communications. His personal effects were cataloged and shipped to Greensboro, North Carolina. His parents received a telegram. His total confirmed score, 26.83 aerial victories, was entered into the official records of the 8th Air Force. The 352nd Fighter Group flew combat missions the next morning. The war did not pause for George Preddy, but the men who had flown with him carried the knowledge of what had happened and what it meant. A pilot who had survived everything the Luftwaffe threw at him for over a year had been killed by Americans in the final weeks of the war in Europe. That fact settled into the squadron like a weight that never quite lifted. 4 months later, on April 17, 1945, First Lieutenant William Preddy took off from his base with the 503rd Fighter Squadron, 339th Fighter Group. He was 20 years old. He had followed his brother into the Army Air Forces and into P-51 Mustangs. On that April morning, he was assigned to strafe České Budějovice airfield in Czechoslovakia. Enemy anti-aircraft fire hit his aircraft during the attack run. He died from his wounds. The Army buried him in Lorraine American Cemetery in Saint-Avold, France. Plot. A row 21. They buried him next to his brother. 2 P-51 pilots. 2 brothers. The same aircraft type, the same war, the same cemetery. 25 and 20 years old respectively. George had survived 532 combat hours across 143 missions. William had followed him into the same sky and paid the same price. The Preddy family of Greensboro, North Carolina, lost both sons before Germany surrendered. George Preddy's final record stood as the highest-scoring P-51 Mustang ace of the entire Second World War. 23.83 victories in the Mustang alone. 3 more in the P-47 Thunderbolt. 5 ground kills from airfield strafing. 3rd highest-scoring American ace in the European theater. 7th highest-scoring American ace overall across all theaters of the war. His decorations included the Distinguished Service Cross Silver Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, Distinguished Flying Cross with 8 oak leaf clusters, Air Medal with 7 oak leaf clusters, Purple Heart, and the Belgian Croix de Guerre. He was nominated for the Medal of Honor. He received the Distinguished Service Cross instead. He never complained about the difference. He just wanted to fly and fight, and he did both until the last possible moment. The Navy had rejected him 3 times. Too short, spinal curvature, high blood pressure. Physically unqualified. They sent him home to his cotton mill and told him his body was not good enough for the sky. The Army took him. And the Army's P-51 Mustang program produced its greatest pilot out of that rejection. George and William Preddy have been in that French cemetery for 80 years, side by side in the same row. Their names are on the stone. Most people who drive past the cemetery on the road between Metz and Saarbrücken have never heard either name. That is the part of this story that refuses to sit still. 6 kills in 6 minutes and 43 seconds. The worst squadron in the 8th Air Force turned into the best in a single mission. 26.83 confirmed victories across 143 missions. Killed by his own side protecting his own ground forces on Christmas morning. The Luftwaffe never got him. They tried for over a year across hundreds of engagements. They failed every time. What finally brought him down was a quad 50 caliber mount operated by Americans who were doing exactly what they had been trained to do. There is no villain in that story. There is only the mathematics of war, which does not distinguish between friend and enemy when rounds are in the air and aircraft are moving at 350 miles per hour at treetop height. Preddy understood those mathematics better than almost anyone. He had been calculating them since December 1943 over Solingen. He knew the odds. He extended his combat tour 4 times because he was willing to accept them. He is buried in Plot A, Row 21, Grave 43. His brother is next to him. They have been there since 1945. You just said their names out loud. That is not nothing. George Preddy flew 143 combat missions. He shot down 26.83 German aircraft. He was rejected by the Navy 3 times, survived a mid-air collision, extended his combat tour 4 times, and shot down 6 fighters while hungover in under 7 minutes. Then friendly fire killed him on Christmas morning. His brother died 4 months later. They are buried side by side in France. That is the biography. But the biography is not the story. The story is what Preddy's example did to the men who flew after him, and what it continues to do to anyone who understands what his career actually demonstrated. When the war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945, the 352nd Fighter Group had accumulated one of the most impressive combat records in the 8th Air Force. 676 confirmed aerial victories. 57 aces produced within a single group. The Blue-Nosed Bastards, the nickname worn with pride, had become synonymous with aggressive, confident fighter leadership. The transformation Preddy had started with the 328th Fighter Squadron in November 1944 had spread through the entire group's culture. John Meyer, the man who had vouched for Preddy on the morning of August 6th and put his own career on the line to keep a drunk pilot in the cockpit, survived the war with 24 confirmed victories. He went on to serve in Korea and eventually became Commander-in-Chief of Strategic Air Command. The faith he placed in Preddy on that August morning was not a one-time judgment call. It was a pattern of recognizing capability that defined his entire career. The group commander, who had nearly grounded Preddy that same morning, was never publicly credited with making the right decision by relenting. History does not record his name in connection with the August 6th mission. It records Preddy's name. That is how outcomes work. The man who nearly stopped it is forgotten. The man who flew is not. Preddy's parents in Greensboro, North Carolina, received 2 telegrams within 4 months of each other. 2 sons. 2 P-51s. 2 cemeteries that turned out to be the same one. The family had given everything the war asked for. There was no ceremony large enough to acknowledge that arithmetic. There was no official acknowledgement that adequately addressed the specific manner of George's death, killed by American guns while protecting American soldiers. The Distinguished Service Cross he received on August 12, 1944, remains the decoration attached to his name in official records. The Medal of Honor nomination that John Meyer submitted with detailed justification was declined. The criteria were not met. What those criteria required, that 6 kills against 30 fighters in a single engagement, failed to satisfy, has never been clearly explained in any public document. But the decoration Preddy valued most was not a medal. It was the name painted on his aircraft. Cripes-a-mighty. His craps table phrase. His personal marker on every machine he flew. It was not about luck. It was about identity. Every time the ground crew finished painting those words on a new fuselage, Preddy was declaring something. This aircraft is mine. I am still here, and I intend to keep being here. He flew 3 aircraft with that name. The third one he died in. The P-51 Mustang itself outlasted the Second World War by decades. The aircraft that the Navy had dismissed, and that nearly never entered production, became the definitive American long-range fighter of the war. It served in Korea. It served in various air forces through the 1980s. The principles it demonstrated, range combined with performance, escort capability combined with air superiority, fundamentally reshaped how military planners thought about fighter aircraft design for the next generation. The specific lesson Preddy demonstrated with the 328th Fighter Squadron in November 1944 was not technical. The aircraft did not change. The pilots did not change. The sky over Germany did not change. What changed was the expectation of outcome. Preddy arrived and communicated through 3 minutes of words and then through direct action at 33,000 feet that aggressive engagement from a position of advantage was not reckless. It was the entire point. 25 German aircraft in 40 minutes. 8 pilots with multiple kills. 3 new aces in a single mission. The worst squadron became the best, not because they received better aircraft or better training or more experienced wingmen. They became the best because someone in the lead aircraft showed them what best looked like and expected them to follow. That principle has been rediscovered repeatedly in military history and repeatedly forgotten between wars. The units that perform at the highest level are almost never the units with the best equipment. They are the units whose leaders are willing to be first into the engagement and who communicate through action, rather than instruction, that success is the expected outcome, rather than the hoped-for one. Preddy communicated that in 3 minutes of briefing and then confirmed it over Mersburg. There is a detail about the August 6th mission that rarely appears in accounts of Preddy's career. When the intelligence officers reviewed his gun camera footage on the afternoon of that mission, they confirmed 5 of the 6 kills through visual evidence. The 6th kill had occurred below cloud cover where no other American pilot had clear visual confirmation. The intelligence officers spent considerable time on that 6th kill. They examined ammunition expenditure. They examined bullet hole patterns in Preddy's aircraft from return fire. They consulted with his wingman. They confirmed it. What the gun camera footage showed on the confirmed 5 kills was a specific detail about Preddy's shooting. Every engagement began at exactly 400 yards or less. Not 350. Not 450. 400 yards consistently across 5 separate engagements with 5 separate aircraft under combat conditions while recovering from a hangover. That level of fire discipline under those conditions was, in the assessment of the intelligence officers who reviewed the footage, essentially unprecedented in their experience reviewing gun camera film. Preddy was not lucky on August 6th. He was extraordinarily precise. The hangover made no measurable difference to his marksmanship, because his marksmanship was not operating at the level where a hangover could degrade it. He was that good. The Navy rejected him because his spine curved slightly and his blood pressure was elevated, and he was 125 pounds at 5 feet 9 inches. They measured the container and decided the contents did not qualify. The Army measured differently, or perhaps did not measure at all, and received in return the highest-scoring P-51 ace the war produced. George Preddy's total aerial victory score of 26.83 represented something that the raw number does not capture. Each engagement required decisions made in fractions of seconds under physical stress, at altitudes where oxygen was thin, in aircraft moving faster than anything that had existed 20 years earlier, against opponents who were also skilled, also motivated, and also trying very hard not to die. 26 times he made those decisions correctly enough that the German aircraft fell, and his did not. On the 27th encounter, the aircraft that killed him was American, operated by Americans, following their training correctly, and there was nothing in his skill set that could have anticipated or countered it. That is the part of the story that sits differently than the rest. The Luftwaffe threw everything at George Preddy for over a year. Their best pilots, their best aircraft, their altitude tactics, and their numerical advantages, and their sun-behind-them approaches. None of it was enough. What finally brought him down was not enemy skill or enemy technology. It was the fog of low-altitude combat, the speed of events, and the impossibility of identification at 350 miles per hour at treetop height over an active front line. He is in plot, a row 21, grave 43 at Lorraine American Cemetery in St. Avold, France. His brother William is next to him. They have been there since 1945, 80 years ago. 2 young men from Greensboro, North Carolina, who followed each other into the same sky and the same war and the same French soil. The Navy said George Preddy's body was not good enough for the sky. He became the greatest P-51 Mustang ace the war produced. He walked into the worst fighter squadron in the 8th Air Force and turned it into the best in a single afternoon. He shot down 26.83 German aircraft across 143 missions and 532 hours. He died protecting the ground forces of the country, whose navy had rejected him 3 times. The measure of a man is not the container. It is what the container does when the sky is full of German fighters and the odds are 30-1, and every rational calculation says, turn back. George Preddy pushed the throttle forward. That is why this story is worth telling. That is why his name deserves to be spoken out loud. If you know a story like this one, share it in the comments. There are hundreds of men like George Preddy in the history of this war. Men whose names appear in military records and nowhere else. Men whose decisions changed the outcome of engagements, that changed the outcome of battles, that changed the outcome of history. Subscribe if you want to find them. And remember, 80 years later, a cotton mill worker from North Carolina, who was too short and too light and had too much spinal curvature to fly for the United States Navy, is still the best P-51 pilot who ever lived. The Navy's loss, the Army's inheritance, history's debt.